Welcome to Trade Finance Talks, a podcast from Trade Finance Global. During this series, we'll be hearing from global experts, as well as learning about the latest trends, technology and insights in the world of international trade and receivables finance. Episode 120.
We were very active in last years, so we financed many different transactions in many markets. For example, we were very active in African countries.
Hello and welcome to Trade Finance Talks. My name is Deepesh Patel, editor at Trade Finance Global. Today, we're diving into the world of structured trade and export finance, a cog in the global trade engine, facilitating billions of dollars in transactions and really enabling businesses to navigate the complexities of international markets. Joining us today is Francesca Beomonte, structured trade and export finance at UniCredit, one of Europe's largest financial institutions. Francesca brings a wealth of experience and insights from her role at UniCredit. According to the OECD, export credits extended by its members amounted to some $162 billion in 2020, underscoring the pivotal role of export credit agencies, or ECAs, supporting international trade. And of course, banks like UniCredit play a significant part in this ecosystem. This ecosystem is vital to supporting new initiatives in international trade as well. In 2023, OECD members agreed to expand ECA support for climate-friendly projects under the Climate Change Sector Understanding, or CSU. The package provides more generous and more flexible financing terms and conditions for all projects eligible under CCSU. So in our conversation today, we're going to explore the symbiotic relationship between ECAs and private sector export finance companies. And we're also going to delve into real-world examples of export finance projects, as well as the role of banks in collaborating with OECD ECAs, including the hurdles that companies face when accessing export finance in risky jurisdictions. Finally, we'll look ahead at the trends shaping the future of export finance. Francesca, welcome to Trade Finance Talks.
Hello, thank you.
Absolutely. Really happy to have you on the show. So, quick introduction. Who are you? Where are you from? And what do you do?
My name is, as you said, Francesca Beomonte, and I started my career many years ago before working in corporates and then moving in the banking industry. I cover within the banking different areas like corporate lending, trade finance, export finance. I became in September 2019 Global Head of Structured Trade and Export Finance within UniCredit. And very recently, I slightly changed my mission and I be Export Credit Agency Senior Originator within UniCredit.
Thank you very much. So just the person to answer the next question, can you provide a bit of an overview to our listeners around how export credit agencies, ECAs, and private sector export finance companies work?
Just let me say something about the export credit agencies. You know, they are additionally supporting industrial and infrastructure investments in emerging countries. So this was the original scope of work of the export credit agencies. Range of investments they are supporting is very large because we are speaking about, as I said, infrastructure, hospital, water treatment, equipment, machinery, etc., etc. And there is one feature which is common on all these projects, and is the fact that we are always speaking about projects with a long period of time to implement it. So construction delivery is generally not lower than 2-3 years. And then also the repayments are quite long. The export credit agency are working on behalf of the government. As you know, they can have different forms because they can be agency working on behalf of the government, like a public company, etc. So there are different schemes depending on the specific countries. As I was saying, they are supporting the national economy to go abroad, to export abroad. ECA words, there are also some strict rules. So you have to follow some mandatory requirements as, for example, the down payment. And in this respect, there is very often a combination together with the so-called private risk insurance, so the PRIs, because they can be complementary, in the sense that PRIs can finance local cost or, as I said, down payment. Something that I think it's important to underline is that whilst up to a few years ago, ECA were considered as a kind of lender of last resort, stepping in only when private sector financing was not available. In these last years, ECAs have taken a greater role because we are providing support in many different sectors. So I think everyone is aware about the fact that in many countries, European countries, ECAs played a key role during the years of the COVID, supporting the local economy. And now they are becoming key players the energy transition. So they are financing, they are supporting still national economy in projects, energy transition, etc.
Thank you very much, Francesca. So to summarize, the role of the ECAs is to support the national economy to grow abroad, abiding by fairly strict rules around payment terms and cooperation with what the PRI, the private risk insurance companies, is doing locally. But obviously that support has now changed in terms of their mandate to be particularly in and around the energy transition. What about companies, banks like UniCredit who offer support or export finance? How does that complement what the ECAs offer, particularly around operating in high-risk jurisdictions and markets?
We were saying before, ECAs very often are operating just providing guarantees. So in some cases, they are also providing direct funding, and they are vehicles that can be used to finance the transaction. The majority of the cases, ECAs are just providing insurance coverage guarantee, which means that there must be someone who is doing the lending, and these are exactly the banks. So a bank as our bank, its main mission is to support clients. So that's why together with the ECAs that we are working with almost all the most important European, but not only ECAs, we are trying to finalize solutions to support our client in our core markets to export abroad or support them in the green projects, energy transition projects, etc.
You mentioned earlier as well that the financing tends to be good tenor, i.e. to 5, say, years, particularly in the construction sector or maybe infrastructure or energy structure. Can you share any examples of successful export finance projects that UniCredit has been involved in and where companies were able to navigate in some of those challenging jurisdictions with the help of that ECA guarantee?
Of course, we were very active in last years, so we financed many different transactions in many markets. For example, we were very active in African countries. We were mainly focused, of course, also on social projects, like, for example, hospitals. We finance a certain number of hospitals and other social infrastructures. But of course, we did also other kind of projects. So just to mention concrete case, I can mention some couple of projects which are well known because they also got awards for 2022. One is the Green Line, which is a railway project in Egypt. So in principle is the first of a certain number of lines that should enhance the train transportation in a large country. Or the Metro of Abidjan in Ivory Coast, which is a project which has been finalized just before the end of 2022, and which is the Metro project, the capital of Ivory Coast. Actually, in these two projects, because as I said, that they are public knowledge, I can disclose them. We are speaking about large projects involving other banks. But it's important to mention that we are not working only on large projects. We are also working on bilateral projects, small, medium-sized projects. So we are trying really to support the entire range of our clients' bases.
Can you give a bit more detail on the Green Line, the railway project in Egypt? So who were the banks? Who was the ECA? What were the financing products that were actually used? And how did it benefit local corporates who were doing the project overseas?
In the Green Line, there are a number of banks, including several national banks. Speaking about Euler Hermes, and because the construction company, so the exporter is. To be honest, in the Green Line, there are two different facilities. There is one Euler facility, such a facility, because there are also some Italian components. As you can imagine, in a country like the railway represent really a unique opportunity because, let's say, I don't know if I've been in Cairo, but let's say the level of traffic is really impressive. And we are speaking about a country of more than 100 million of people, which there is, I don't know exactly, 15, 20 million being in Cairo. So I think the infrastructure system is really important to support the mobility of the people, and also, of course, then the possibility to develop business, etc. So this is a very important project. As I said, Egypt just started with these infrastructure projects. They already did the previous year the monorail. This is the Green Line. Then there will be other two projects which are called Red and Blue Line. The number of banks is very large, is involving all the most important players.
Thank you, Francesca. Really good example there. And you can see why the ECA involvement was needed. I guess with your involvement within the European Banking Federation, how can banks continue to collaborate with export credit agencies around the world?
Thank you for this question. As you can imagine, banks is super important to collaborate with ECAs because considering that we are speaking of projects, we already saying at the beginning, very long in terms of tenor, very long in terms of construction of the underlying project, etc. The sense of the EA coverage give to the bank also the possibility to relieve the capital utilization. And this is something very important. Of course, as chairman of the export finance expert group within EBF, we worked quite a lot for the advocacy of the regulatory topics, but also, of course, for the modernization of the OECD, because he is ruling the entire framework of the ECAs belonging to OECD, and there are many rules, and we were thinking, but I think this now has been approved, that a modernization would have been important in order to give more flexibility, especially for the green projects, for the sustainable projects. These new stuff rules will become effective in July 15, and I think it was a very good cooperation among all the stakeholders of the export finance industry, and a good result which has been achieved.
Absolutely. It's quite the overhaul. Can you go into a little bit more detail around the actual modernization of those rules, the impact that it will have on real economy and also on OECD ECAs in terms of their mandates?
The modernization of the OECD came into force on July 15. This is really a great achievement because it's something that was under discussion since some time. But finally, I guess that all the participants OECD realized that it was really needed to modernize something that in any case is there since 50 years almost. And so what are the most important news? We can say that there will be longer repayments, goods and services. The repayments should be consistent, let's say like this, with useful life of the goods or of the investment. And there will be also more flexibility, the financial structure of the transactions, which means that in terms of capital repayment, interest repayments, you can have a frequency, a different size, etc., etc. These longer repayment terms and financial structuring flexibility will be available for a broader range of climate-friendly transactions. So there is the ESG target, a driver of this important modernization. Maybe we can also mention that, for example, OECD has established that coal-fired power plant will not be anymore eligible for ECA financing. We are really going into the direction to support mainly sustainable projects.
I guess this is all around leveling the playing field, supporting the transition. Of course, we could spend an entire podcast talking about supporting the transition away from coal, and I'm sure it's a lot more gated and nuanced than that. But essentially, this is all around de-risking in business in certain jurisdictions due to inherent risk, be that geopolitical risk, currency risk, payment risk. Let's talk about it from a company's perspective or an exporter's perspective. What strategies or tools can exporters employ to really minimize the risks associated with export finance in some of these more challenging jurisdictions?
I think this is a super important question because as you can imagine, to work in high-risk jurisdiction is sometimes require a lot of energy, and I am referring especially to our clients, to our exporters. As you can imagine, usually there are negotiations with counterparts that in some cases are foreign counterparts. So we are speaking about the Ministry of Finance, etc. And sometimes the commercial negotiation can be really very, very long. I experienced a transaction where the time to finalize a commercial contract was longer than near 2 years, even 3 years. It's very, very long. And then I have to say, not all the companies are really equipped to do this. Sometimes you need really people who knows very well the area, who is used to interact with the ministry in the African countries or other high-risk countries. There are also some risks that need to be covered, as for example, let's say risk related to the performance of the commercial contract. In this case, for example, companies are sometimes using either ECA or private risk insurance to cover the performance risk, to cover the risk related to the fact that the contract can be interrupted, for example. Another risk that usually the exporters are looking for is the risk related really to the usual insurance risk, I don't know, fire or hacker, and so there are also this kind of risk which needs to be covered. Whilst the export finance scheme itself is covering the credit risk. So for the exporters, the ECA buyer credit solution is a very good solution because they are getting the money once the works are progressing. In this respect, I think it's a good way to finance this kind of project, but nevertheless they have to take care of all the other risks related to the works and to the deliveries they have.
Thank you. And I guess final question, what trends do you foresee, Francesca, in the field of export finance as OECD rules change and we look to trying to support exporters operating in risky jurisdictions?
We've briefly commented at the beginning, export finance is in a certain sense enlarging quite a lot its scope of work, because usually and traditionally export finance was supposed to support infrastructure investments and capital goods in risky jurisdiction, but now there are a lot of investments which are financed with export finance also in European countries. And this is exactly related to the fact that there are some kind of investments, for example, in the energy transition. If we think about wind farm investments, for example, that need really long tenure in terms of construction, in terms of repayment. And so the most favorite way to finance this kind of investments is exactly the export finance scheme. It can be corporate financing, can be a project finance, it can be a structured transaction. We can say that there are trends in the export finance. So the traditional export finance is still going ahead. Maybe there are differences in terms of geographical areas, and the transition and all the investments related to this are also a new frontier for the export finance.
Francesca, thank you very much. It's been such a pleasure having you on Trade Finance Talks. I think some of the key take-homes from that is really to understand your risks, understand the transaction, and also understand how the key players in export finance, whether it's the private and insurance sector, the underwriters, the export credit agencies, the export finance banks operate. And in terms of risky business, there are lots of opportunities, and also there are lots of opportunities to grow and support developing and emerging economies, providing the transaction is structured right. Francesca, thank you for joining me.
Thank you to you to give me the possibility to participate to this interesting podcast. Many thanks.
Thanks for listening to Trade Finance Talks. Be sure to subscribe to our podcasts at tradefinanceglobal.com.